want to give you a little bit of a context for how I got into this. I did spend 24 years in IT. I wrote a book about elder care because my mother declined with Alzheimer's over an 8-year period. I spent a lot of time in assisted living and nursing homes. I became a volunteer in Florida when I moved there, ombudsman for nursing homes and assisted living. And then I decided maybe I want to become a geriatric care manager, so I enrolled in the University of Florida's program, certification program, and I did one project that was researching a bibliography about technologies for the home. And it was at that point, I won't hit my head because it'll probably make the mic go off, but I had one of these moments that was essentially an aha moment that there aren't very many people, if any, in the United States right now who have the combination of backgrounds that I have, and therefore, and the interests that I have, and the consciousness raised. I've had my consciousness raised a couple times in my life through the aging experience with my mother. My consciousness definitely got raised. And if you look at some of the data from the ARP, I love ARP data, I spend all my time with it. Successful aging has been acknowledged by those surveyed as being able to do things for myself, as we've heard, having good health, and feeling safe. And my mother was not an example of successful aging, and I would like to, in fact, promote that and enable it with the use of technologies, which is why I've started an industry analyst firm. And I just want to give you 1 second on what is an industry analyst and how does it relate to startup companies. It's not a financial analyst. It's not a VC firm that invests in companies. Industry analysts describe market shapes, and they identify the presence of participants in those markets, and they predict trends about the directions those markets will take over time. So that's what industry analysts do. That's my role. That's why on my website you will not see advertising, because the whole point of an industry analyst is third-party objectivity. So with that, I'll just barrel on here. So I'm not going to spend much time on this. I think we've talked about this quite exhaustively, but let's remember that aside from this caregiving nightmare that's ahead of us, one of the issues that has been raised by those people who are surveyed is they fear nursing homes worse than death. So let's take a look at the looming crisis of care that we're entering, and this is the gaps between these lines is where we need to insert the technologies that will actually enable us to have more successful aging. So if you look at the cost on the bottom left of the hand of this chart of $36,000 a year for assisted living in 2007, we know that in 2015 it's going to go up to $51,000 a year to be in assisted living. To more of a personal status issue, which is how we stay engaged with the outside world, to personal safety issue, which is, are we in fact as safe as we could be and as protected as we could be from potentially the risk of things like falling, to in fact more than 2 chronic diseases for so many of us that require medication reminders and potential wellness guides, and eventually to our personal medical status. This progression of independent to frailer, while we can interfere with it and try to make ourselves well, we really need to acknowledge it, in fact, that it is a phenomenon for many people and provide more supportive technology. And so what I believe is that aging in place depends on enabling what are today disconnected relationships between providers, which can include geriatric care managers and home care agencies and all kinds of people who deliver care, seniors, and their family and caregivers. And the fact that those relationships are largely disconnected, despite, in fact, insertions of technology in some or other segments of them, that is the opportunity. And that is the thing we will do to fill in those gaps in the growth of people needing care and the growth in people providing care. So this is how I see the market. I basically think there are 4 aging in place technology categories, and these are the 4. In the upper left is communication and engagement. Now, when I show examples of technologies that exist today that meet the needs of communication and engagement, this is not to imply that these are the technology categories by 2020. Simply that communication and engagement is one of the dimensions of the aging in place technology market, and today these are the categories of technologies that fulfill that market. So that's how we're going to stay connected with the outside world, and we're going to continue to need mechanisms for doing that. On the right, home safety and security, those technology categories exist today. Security technologies, personal emergency response, home monitoring. On the bottom left, you can see health and wellness technologies, and those are just some examples of technologies today: cognitive fitness, medication dispensing and reminders, Fit, which turns out to be maybe the most disruptive technology invented for the aging process in recent years. And then on the right, learning and contribution, which we've talked a little bit about, that actually people are very interested in this, which could include distance learning, it could be telephone-based learning, it could be an interesting website called retiredbrains.com. It could be the ability to leave a legacy to our children, and it could be our ability to stay in the social networking and volunteering, and finally, the ability to work into our later years, because we are all, I think, in one way or another, going to want to work into our later years for various reasons. The problem with this market, and let me just say one thing more about this space here. I believe the reason this is an interlocking puzzle picture is because you cannot leave one of these out. If you leave one of those out, people run the risk of isolation, depression, they neglect their medications, they run the risk of disinterest in their health, they fall, they don't take their meds, they end up in a hospital, they go to rehab, they end up in a nursing home. You can do that same scenario I just described with any one of these puzzle sections. You take it out, you run the risk of the other problems occurring. So that's the reason this is, the market must solve the needs in all four of these categories and not skip one.